I wonder if he'd even scream if I push him down the stairs, Talia whispered. She wasn't even bothering to lower her voice anymore. She was standing 3 feet away from Greg, leaning against a marble kitchen island. He could hear the ice clinking in her glass. He could hear the man standing next to her, the man she brought into their home, unzipping his jacket with a slow, arrogant metal teeth sound. He wouldn't, Ben replied. His voice was a low, jagged rasp. He'd just break, like everything else he built. Greg sat in his armchair, his body perfectly still, behind the pitch-black lenses of his glasses. His eyes were wide open, staring at the digital feed projected onto the glass. He saw them clearly. He saw his wife's hand sliding into Ben's back pocket. He saw Ben smirking as he looked at Greg's blind face. Ben walked over, his heavy boots thudding on the floor. He stopped inches away from Greg's knees. He reached out and waved a hand directly in front of Greg's face. Greg didn't blink. He didn't move a muscle. Dead to the world, Ben laughed. He leaned down, his breath smelling of expensive bourbon and cheap malice. Hey, old man, I'm kissing your wife right now. What are you going to do about it? Greg felt the heat of the man's presence. He felt the urge to reach out and wrap his hands around Ben's throat, but he stayed frozen. He was a statue in a high-back chair. He was a ghost in his own house. Leave him alone, Ben, Talia said, though she was smiling. He's got his meds in him. He's gone. It hadn't always been this way. It all happened a year ago. Back then, Greg was the one standing at the head of the boardroom table, commanding respect with a single look. The stroke happened 6 months into their marriage, a warning shot that missed his heart but hit his head. For 48 hours in that hospital bed, Greg was truly blind. He had clutched Talia's hand like it was his only connection to the living. I'll be your eyes, Greg, she had whispered then. He believed her. But on the 3rd night, the gray smudge broke. His vision returned, sharp and unforgiving. He was about to tell her, but then he saw her in the master bedroom, holding his gold watch up to the light. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. She looked at his reflection in the mirror with pure disgust and mouthed a single word. Finally, Greg realizing that a blind man hears things a sighted man ignores. He stayed blind. He got the glasses, custom-made with a 4K pinhole lens in the bridge. He also realized something else. The tea she brought him every night tasted like bitter almonds. Sedatives. Talia walked over now, holding a small white pill. Time for your evening supplement, Greg. The doctor says it'll help with the nerve regeneration. Greg didn't move. Is it working, Talia? I feel heavier lately, like my mind is drifting. That's just the healing process, honey, she said. She placed the pill on his tongue. Greg swallowed. Or rather, he flicked the pill into the small gap between his cheek and gum. He'd become an expert at cheeking his meds. Every morning, while they thought he was napping, he would drain the drug drinks into the sink and refill the containers with plain water and food coloring. He was sober, sharp, and watching every move they made. You're a saint, Talia, Greg whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you and Ben. He's been so helpful around the house. He saw her stiffen to the camera feed. Ben is a good man, she said, her voice tight. He just wants to see you comfortable. I am comfortable, Greg said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. In fact, I feel so good tonight, I thought I might try to walk to the balcony. Alone? Talia's eyes widened. No. Greg, you're too weak. Sit down. She hissed the words, her mask slipping. She rushed over, grabbing his arm, through the fabric. He felt her heart racing. She wasn't worried about his safety. She was worried about her timeline. You're right, Greg sighed, sinking back. I'm just a burden. Just rest, she said, already turning toward the door to pour herself another drink. As soon as her back was turned, Ben stepped closer. He leaned down, his mouth right against the side of Greg's head. He made sure he was whispering low enough that Talia wouldn't hear. You're a tough old bastard, aren't you? Dad, Ben hissed. Greg's blood ran cold. The word was a confession and a death threat all in one. He searched his memory. digging back 30 years to a woman named Sarah and a younger version of himself who had handed her an envelope of cash to make a problem go away. Ben wasn't just a lover. He was a son Greg had discarded, and he was playing Talia just as much as he was playing Greg. Ben stood back up and raised his voice so Talia could hear him again. "He's gone, Talia. Look at him. You could set the house on fire, and he'd just sit there. Get the papers ready for tomorrow morning. He signs at dawn. And after that, we give him the special dose, the one that makes sure he never wakes up to complain." They walked out together, their laughter echoing in the hallway like a sharpened blade. They were so confident in the drugs, so sure of his blindness, that they didn't even bother to close the door. Greg waited. He counted to 60. Then he reached into his cheek and spat the white pill into his palm. He stood up, his movements fluid and strong. He walked to the kitchen, opened a container of sedatives Talia kept on the counter, and swapped the remaining pills with ordinary aspirin he'd crushed into the same shape. He looked at the glasses sitting on the table. The red light was still blinking. Everything was recorded. Every threat. Every admission of the drug plot. "You want a seat at the table, Ben?" Greg whispered to the empty air. "I'll give you a seat, but you're going to hate the view." He sat back down, adjusted his shades, and went back to being the broken old man. He had 12 hours until dawn. 12 hours to finish the plan that would turn his mansion into a prison for the two people who thought they were his jailers. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when Greg heard the rustle of silk and the heavy tread of boots in the hallway. He had spent the night staring into the digital dark of his glasses, watching the playback of their betrayal until his eyes burned. He knew every smirk, every touch, and every word they'd used to bury him. He was back in his armchair by the window when Talia entered. She was wearing a vibrant red dress, the kind of dress a woman wears to a celebration, not a sick room. "Good morning, Greg," she chirped, her voice light and brittle. She set a tray down on the side table. "I made your favorite. Poached eggs and that herbal tea you like so much." Greg didn't look at her. He tilted his head toward the window, catching the reflection of her face in the glass of his lenses. She was checking her makeup in the silver teapot, completely ignoring him. "You're up early, Talia," Greg said. His voice was steady, missing the usual tremor he used to fake his weakness. Talia paused, her hand hovering over the sugar bowl. "The lawyer is coming at 8. Honey, we need to get those insurance papers signed so we can start that new treatment in Switzerland. Don't you want to see again?" "I want to see everything," Greg replied. He reached out and picked up the teacup. He knew she had spiked it. He'd watched her through the cracked door earlier as she emptied 2 of the special capsules into the kettle. She expected him to be unconscious by 10. Instead, Greg took a long, deliberate sip. He'd already swapped the kettle water with a batch he'd prepared. "Is Ben joining us?" Greg asked. Talia froze. "Ben? The handyman? Why would he join us for breakfast, Greg?" "I just thought I heard his voice last night," Greg said, staring straight ahead through his dark lenses. "In the hallway." He sounded so close. It was almost like he was standing right over my bed, calling me something. The color drained from Talia's face. She looked toward the door, where Ben was leaning against the frame, watching them. Ben's jaw tightened. He stepped into the room, his eyes fixed on Greg's glasses, trying to see if there was any flicker of recognition. "I was just checking the locks, Greg," Ben said, his voice a low growl. "Big house like this, you can't be too careful who gets in." "You're absolutely right, Ben," Greg said. He turned his head slowly toward the sound of Ben's voice. "Security is everything. It's funny, I had a dream about a boy last night, a boy with a scar on his face. He was crying, and I was walking away. Do you believe in ghosts, Ben?" The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. Ben's hand went instinctively to the jagged scar on his jaw. He looked at Talia, his eyes wide with sudden, sharp fear. "It's just the meds, Greg," Talia stammered, rushing over to press a hand to his forehead. "You're having vivid dreams. It's a side effect." "Maybe," Greg whispered. "Or maybe the dark just makes the past clearer." The doorbell rang. The sound cut through the tension like a physical blow. "That's Mr. Henderson," Talia said, her voice shaking. "The lawyer." Ben, go let him in. Ben didn't move for a long second. He stared at Greg, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of a chair. He felt like he was being watched, even though Greg's eyes were hidden behind black glass. Finally, he turned and stomped out of the room. A few minutes later, a tall man in a sharp charcoal suit entered. Mr. Henderson had been Greg's lawyer for 20 years, but Greg knew Talia had been consulting with him privately for months. "Good morning, Greg," Henderson said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. He laid a thick stack of papers on the table. "I have the health proxy and the asset management forms here. Talia says you're ready to authorize the transfer for the European clinic." "I'm ready to sign everything I deserve," Greg said. Talia hovered over him, a pen held out like a weapon. "Right here, honey. Just a small X on the line. I'll guide your hand." Greg felt her fingers wrap around his. They were trembling. He could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive that now smelled like rot to him. He looked at the document through his glasses. It was an insurance form. It was a total power of attorney, giving Talia and her heir full control of the Sterling Empire. Greg took the pen. He moved it toward the paper. Ben leaned in, his breath hot on the back of Greg's neck, his eyes hungry for the signature that would seal his revenge. Just as the nib touched the paper, Greg stopped. "You know, Henderson," Greg said, his voice suddenly cold and loud, "I was thinking about my will last night, about my son." Talia gasped. Ben stiffened. "You don't have a son, Greg," Henderson said smoothly. "We've been over this." "I thought I didn't," Greg said. He turned his head toward Ben. "But lately, I feel like he's been standing right in front of me, like he's been waiting 30 years to tell me how much he hates me." Ben took a step back, his face a massive shock. "Greg, you're not making sense. Just sign the papers." "I'll sign," Greg said. He slashed a signature across the bottom of the page. Talia snatched the paper away, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "It's done. Henderson, take it. It's official." "Is it?" Greg asked. He stood up. He didn't use the chair for support. He didn't wobble. He stood tall, his shoulders back, looking like the king he used to be. He reached up and slowly slid the dark glasses off his face. His eyes were clear, sharp, and filled with a terrifying, icy rage. He looked directly at Talia, then shifted his gaze to Ben, landing right on the scar. "I've seen the papers, Talia," Greg said, his voice echoing in the vast room. "And I've seen the two of you in my kitchen. I've seen the kisses. I've seen the pills." He looked at Ben, whose face had gone a sickly shade of gray. "And I've seen you, son," Greg whispered. "I know who you are, and I know you're planning to kill the woman who helped you get in here the moment my heart stops beating." The room went deathly silent. Talia looked at Ben, her triumph turning into a sudden, horrific realization. "Ben," she whispered, "what is he talking about?" Greg smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, didn't he tell you, Talia? You aren't his partner. You're just his ticket. He's the only legal heir. Once I'm gone, he doesn't need a wife. He just needs a lawyer to prove his bloodline and kick you to the curb." Greg tapped the side of his glasses and laid them on the table. "Everything is on the cloud," Greg said. "The drugs, the conspiracy, and the confession. The police are already at the gate." Outside, the first faint sound of siren began to wail. The sound of the sirens was a low thrum in the distance, but inside the room, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and cold sweat. Ben's hand moved faster than anyone expected. He didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the heavy crystal decanter on the sideboard, smashing it against the marble. He held the jagged glass neck like a dagger, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "You think a few cops scare me?" Ben roared, the years of abandonment boiling over into pure, unhinged rage. "I've lived in the dirt while you sat on this throne. If I don't get this empire, I'll make sure you don't live to see the sunset." He lunged. Talia screamed, shrinking back into the corner, her red dress caught on a chair. Greg didn't move. He didn't flinch. As Ben surged forward, Greg simply stepped to the left with a grace that a dying man shouldn't have possessed. He caught Ben's wrist, twisting it with a strength born of a lifetime of hard labor before the money came. The glass shard shattered on the floor. "You're fast, Ben," Greg whispered into his son's ear, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "But I spent 30 years looking over my shoulder to build this. You only spent 30 years looking for someone to blame." Greg shoved him back. Ben stumbled, hitting the floor just as the dining room doors were kicked off their hinges. "Police!" Hands in the air. The room was suddenly flooded with tactical gear and the red dots of laser sights. Ben was tackled to the rug, his face pressed into the expensive fibers he had so desperately wanted to own. Talia was hauled up, her makeup smeared, her perfect life dissolving into a pair of cold steel handcuffs. "Wait!" Talia shrieked, looking at Greg. "Greg, honey, tell them it was a game. We were just role-playing. I love you." Greg walked over to her. He didn't look angry. He looked pitying. He leaned in and whispered loud enough for the body cams to catch every word. "You love the gold on my wrist, Talia. But you forgot that the man wearing it is the one who bought the watch, and the house, and the security team that's been watching you sleep for the last 3 weeks. He turned to the lead detective and handed over the dark glasses. "It's all in there," Greg said. "The conspiracy to medicate me into a coma, the identity of the accomplice, and the attempted assault. I believe you'll find everything you need for a life sentence." As they dragged Ben out, he stopped, twisting his head back to look at the man in the silk robe. "You're still a monster, Greg. You're still the man who walked away." "Maybe," Greg said, standing tall against the morning light. "But I'm a monster who can see clearly now, and I see exactly where you're going." The heavy doors closed. The sirens faded. Greg stood alone in the center of the vast, quiet room. He walked to the window and watched the sunrise. He was a billionaire. He was a survivor. And for the first time in his life, he was truly, finally, the master of his own house. Sometimes the greatest darkness isn't the loss of sight. It's the people we choose to let into our light. Greg lost his vision, but he found his truth. Do you think Ben deserves a second chance? We will find out what happens when the legal battle begins, and what was in the secret letter Greg found in Ben's pocket. You won't believe the final twist that changes everything about Ben's mother resurface. Before then, drop your comments below. We would love to know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the epic conclusion. Thanks so much for watching.